In the massive data dump called the Panama Papers, 7:30 has found evidence of Australians involved in a series of deals that could have been in breach of international sanctions. The lure for the deals is valuable rare earths and other minerals. But to dig them out of the ground, you need to deal with the most repressive and reclusive of states, North Korea. The deals involve two Australians, a Brisbane-based geologist and a Sydney businessman. Both were involved with companies that made public announcements about mining agreements that could be in breach of United Nations sanctions against North Korea. Reporter Mark Willisey and producer Lisa Main have this exclusive story.
This case should have been low-hanging fruit. Really, no one's been held accountable for a wide range of deals involving a sanctioned entity in North Korea. I don't think that's acceptable.
I am actually stunned by Australian authorities' failure to detect and prevent this from going forward.
It's touted as $1 trillion El Dorado, an untapped vein of unparalleled mineral wealth. But the price of digging it up is dealing with one of the world's most corrupt and murderous regimes.
It's very clear to me that the North Korean regime is the worst violator of human rights in the world. It's really something out of George Orwell. It's frightening.
But there are those prepared to do deals with this Orwellian regime, even though it could mean skirting international sanctions.
Rather than applying sanctions, the Australian government and the ASX seem to have allowed a coach and horses to be ridden through them by the people involved in forming this relationship, corporate relationship, with one of the primary arms manufacturers in North Korea.
The corporate relationship he's referring to is complex, global, and involves mysterious characters. The public face is Louis Sherman, an Australian geologist who sees no problem doing business with Kim Jong-un's regime.
We don't deal with companies, we deal with the government themselves. Our contracts are watertight.
Based here in Brisbane, Louis Sherman has been travelling to North Korea for at least 4 years. The geologist spruiks the closed state as the biggest mining boom in the world just waiting to happen. A land bursting with unexploited deposits of gold, silver, copper, zinc, iron ore and rare earths. For 2 years, Washington-based corruption investigator J.R. Maley has been tracking the South African-born Sherman, his partners and his North Korean mining deals. He has interviewed dozens of people and read hundreds of documents. But it wasn't until 7:30 showed him documents we'd obtained that he realised just how deep these connections run.
The documents obtained by ABC have pierced the veil of anonymous shell companies in this case.
J.R. Maley has had a series of phone conversations with Louis Sherman about his many deals in the Hermit Kingdom.
Well, that's the rare earth project. There's 7 other rare earth projects plus another 6 newly defined and discovered carbonatites. And then we have is about 4 gold projects between Pyongyang and Wonsan on the east coast.
Louis Sherman was surprisingly open and revealed all these deals were split evenly with the government in Pyongyang.
So we do a deal on a project. It's a 50-50 deal, but the license is held within a company in Singapore where we can actually claim legal support.
This was done to ease investors nervous about throwing their money into a venture with a rogue nuclear-armed state. However, tonight, 7:30 can reveal that 2 of the companies linked to Louis Sherman and another Australian have raised questions about compliance with sanctions. Dr. Sherman joined Sydney businessman David Sutton on the board of AAT. They would later pair up again on the board of another company called EHG.
Throughout my investigation, the name David Sutton popped up over and over and over again. David Sutton was a director of both AAT Corporation and EHG Corporation during periods of time in which they held North Korean mineral licenses. He also is the man who Sherman says introduced him to the North Korean deals.
But just who was their joint venture partner on the North Korean side.
His companies do business with a few state-owned companies, one of which, Korea Natural Resources Development and Investment Corporation, is under sanctions by the United Nations.
The United Nations says the firm's real name is Green Pine Associated Corporation, and it's the regime's primary arms dealer and main exporter of goods and equipment related to ballistic missiles and conventional weapons, responsible for approximately half of the arms exported by North Korea.
Having looked at the documents that they submitted to the ASX, it's quite clear that they are forming a relationship with a sanctioned entity in North Korea. And they must have been aware of that, and the ASX should have been aware of it too.
The stock exchange told 7:30 that matters to do with UN sanctions are outside its jurisdiction. In a call with corruption investigator J.R. Maley, Louis Sherman denied the deals were in any way sanctions busting.
No, that must be a mistake, because any company or any personality we deal with is not on that list of the sanctions at all.
In a written response to 7:30's questions, David Sutton said the joint venture partner was not the NRDIC, but companies with similar sounding names. But that explanation doesn't wash with William Newcombe, who until 2014 was a member of the UN Security Council's panel of experts on North Korea.
From what I know, there is no distinction other than the spelling, that these are one and the same entities. The placement of Korea or Chosun in front of a company name is inconsequential. It's a common tactic to either add or remove a name like that. I've seen it in various banking traffic. I've seen it on shipping invoices and things of that sort. It's just a way to confuse and deceive.
Confronted with this in a follow-up call, Louis Sherman insisted his involvement was nominal.
I was put on as a director purely because they wanted to empower me in front of the North Korean guys. I never had dealings or any contracts or at that stage.
Louis Sherman says the key to the deals with the North Koreans was this man, former British billionaire turned bankrupt Kevin Leach, a businessman said to be deeply connected to the Kim regime.
Kevin Leach is the main guy, and his shareholders are basically people from Europe and mainly Switzerland. So there are people out there with money who actually recognise that North Korea will have a future.
But the AAT and EHG joint ventures would never get off the ground, and Louis Sherman and David Sutton would depart the boardrooms of both companies. But that doesn't mean they're giving up on their dream of a lucrative mining deal with the regime in Pyongyang. In fact, the biggest deal of all could still be in play, and it's called the Jongju target.
The deals may be in breach of United Nations sanctions and could feed into Pyongyang's weapons program.
In 2014, the ABC revealed Louis Sherman was the lead scientist with SRE Minerals, which claimed to have discovered a 200 million tonne deposit of rare earth minerals northwest of the capital, Pyongyang. If true, the Jongju target would potentially be worth trillions of dollars. After this story went to air, the ABC was told the case was never referred to the Australian Federal Police.
When I read that this matter was brought up in the Australian Senate, I believe, some 18 months ago, and that DFAT is aware of it, and that this had not been referred to the Australian Federal Police for investigation, I was absolutely stunned.
I'm a little baffled. Because now rare earths are specifically mentioned in UN Security Council resolutions. By definition, success means legal jeopardy.
This rare earths venture was still being touted to investors until recently. Leaked documents obtained by the ABC reveal a cabal of colourful businessmen is behind it. The ownership of the company can be traced back to this man, Gibraltar-based Briton John Lister, who was recently named in a US securities case. While there is no specific allegation against him personally, 10 entities he was involved in were found to have engaged in large-scale fraud.
They had siphoned this money off to a wide range of offshore companies, many of which were based in Gibraltar and traced back to Mr. Lister's address. And he's named in the case as somebody who is linked to the deals.
While it's not suggested Louis Sherman has been involved in any wrongdoing, there are questions about the wisdom of him being involved in a rare earths venture in North Korea. So where does Louis Sherman fit in all of this? Is he a player or is he just a patsy?
He absolutely should have known better. I don't accept that he didn't have the resources or wherewithal to understand that. I mean, it's either willful blindness or extreme negligence. One of the two.
Louis Sherman agreed to be interviewed for this story, but he later pulled out.
What I would suggest is that there is sufficient information here to create enough cause for law enforcement to do a very thorough investigation.
The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade told us it was unable to comment on specific cases.
DFAT should be alert to sanctions busting by Australian corporations, and it doesn't seem to be interested.